Kansas State's locker room vibe is back, but Chris Klieman says the success in UCF only exposes how far the Wildcats still have to go before they hit the Baylor Bears.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. We're talking Kansas State football today because we are in Baylor week. And should be a huge week. This is one this offseason that I thought could be the Big 12 game of the year. And I still kind of lean towards that. Although it's not seen as a marquee matchup, this matchup will be on 11 o'clock a.m. Central Time on ESPN+. This is a huge matchup for Kansas State to continue to get right after that win against UCF. And as much as the energy is back with this locker room, as much as the success that we saw with both the offense, the defense, the special teams, you name it, against UCF in that nice 2-score victory, there's still a lot of things that need to be improved before taking on a team like Baylor, who is in the same boat. One loss in the Big 12, a second loss by either of these teams in conference could derail and end your season in the first 4 days of October. So we're going to dig into what Chris Klieman said on Monday. We're going to talk a little bit more about the UCF game and then put our full focus towards Baylor by the end of this one. Lots of stuff to talk about. Hit that subscribe button right here on Locked On Kansas State, your team every day, bringing you coverage, Wildcat coverage like no one else right here. So the Wildcats still have a lot to do to not only get ready for Baylor, but dare I say, be a Big 12 contender. And I think they're on the fringe. I really do. After that win against UCF, I think there is a strong, optimistic feeling about this Kansas State team that you can be right in the thick of it, right back into the conversation of Arlington if you get this win against Baylor on Saturday. It gives you the momentum you need to have that focus towards TCU, Texas Tech, Utah, some tough matchups down the line. And I'm not forgetting the game against Kansas in Lawrence this season. Those are so many other big games this season. And Baylor is kind of on the up and up when it comes to Kansas State as well. They're not succeeding as much as we all expected them to be. So you have to get this win. If you remember, if you were listening, if you're an everydayer and you listen this offseason, my prediction for Kansas State, of course, it's already out the window, was 10-2 on the seasons with only losses to Baylor and to Utah. I have to change my thought process here, although I think this game is still going to be very tough, and it's probably going to be the toughest battle for our defense this season when it comes to Big 12 play. You have to get this win. So can't get that as a loss as I predicted all offseason. I'll give you my final predictions on that on Friday's episode. Maybe I will change my mind. We got a little bit of time to make that happen. But the defense was, I guess you could say, a bright spot at times against UCF. They had a bend, don't break mentality. But although it was a bend, don't break, they were still pretty leaky in this one. They started off strong versus UCF. Then they gave up an 82-yard touchdown on what Chris Klieman says it wasn't a misplay. It was just a bad angle, bad technique. And I agree with him. I kind of enjoy how he explained it, too. He didn't really throw Wesley Fair under the bus because, yeah, he didn't play the play amazingly. But overall, I think Wesley Fair had a really good game. And also, he mentioned that Wesley Fair and VJ Payne, which I didn't even really notice during the game until he mentioned it, and then I couldn't stop paying attention to it during my rewatch earlier this week, that they shifted positions. VJ Payne and Wesley Fair swap spots. So VJ Payne could be more the middle field safety, be able to fly around a lot more, maybe help with his pressing issue. And then Wesley Fair could be on the boundary. And I think that showed immediate benefits. I think that truly did. And although you did get that 182-yard touchdown pass, I don't think you can hold that against that position switch. I think in the long run, that's going to wind up being a huge advantage for Kansas State down the line. And look, if you take that 80-yard touchdown away in the first half, UCF only had 49 total yards. So a huge shout out to the defense. The front four were amazing. Austin Romaine and his linebacking core, listened to the call out that I shouted out last week and said and proved that this was a team that should be seen as one of the top defenses in the Big 12. And Austin Romaine put himself right back on the map. If you look at PFF scores, if you look at how he performed, about being one of the best linebackers, not only in the Big 12, but in the country. And I think you're going to see him with a lot of hype once we get towards the end of the season, when pro days start, and you're going to hear his name a ton when we are starting to get into NFL draft type. And of course, we're going to have you covered right here on that one, because I think there is a strong chance that at the very minimum, we see him as a top 100 draft pick next April for the NFL draft. Speaking, let's continue on the secondary here, because, although you did give up that explosive play, Chris Klieman insists that those explosive plays issues have to be fixed in order to contend for the Big 12, and especially against Baylor. We're going to dive a little deeper into Baylor in just a minute, but Sawyer Robertson is going to expose those deep plays. He has probably the best wide receiver core in the Big 12 this year. He's leading the country in touchdowns, or in passing yards, I should say. I don't actually know if it's touchdowns, but he's absolutely cooking. I've said that there's going to be a quarterback in New York for the Heisman Trophy from the Big 12 this year. I was hoping to be Avery Johnson with that dark horse candidate feels I was trying to push at, but I think we're going to see who that is on Saturday in Waco. I think Sawyer Robertson has the absolute potential. The way he started his season, although not great on the Baylor side with their record, I think Sawyer Robertson has a strong chance to be seen as a Heisman Trophy candidate when it's all said and done. Quay Moss was absolutely incredible, and so was Gunnar Maldonado. For the first time, we saw Gunnar Maldonado, dare I say, in full health. He got to be without his knee brace on, and you could see the speed, you could see the reaction. Everything was so much better for Gunnar Maldonado. It showed his prime Arizona days type of play out there on the field against UCF. The reason why we were so excited to bring him over in the transfer portal, we got a taste of that against the Knights this past Saturday. If Quay Moss and Gunnar Maldonado step up the way they did against UCF, and Maldonado got an interception, should have got two. VJ Payne also should have got an interception while we're just on that same conversation. And then Quay Moss had an insane interception on the boundary, one-handed, crazy grab, still found his way to stay in bounds to turn that game over. And dare I say, that highlight interception really sealed the deal for Kansas State. If all of that secondary can stay in the greatest position that they are right now, because I think we are seeing them play their best football at this moment. And that took a little bit, and I think we all knew it was going to take a little while to get to that point to where they were filling the shoes of Jacob Parrish, Marquise Siegel, things like that. If they can continue that and they play the same way they did against UCF, they will still probably get exposed by Sawyer Robertson. So that's why I'm getting at, they still have more work to do. And I'm focusing on the secondary, although they played great, although Zayshawn Rich has played every snap but 5 over the last 2 games. Insane. He played all 83 against Arizona, only missed 5 snaps this past week against UCF. If you can get that type of play and then a little bit more, not only can you shut down Sawyer Robertson, maybe cause a few turnovers, but I think you win that football game. And that is going to be the key to this one. I'm going to have some keys to who's going to be the top players heading into this week. And I guarantee you 2 of those 3 key players will be from the secondary, because it is way more important than the offense taking care of business. Now, for the record, they're going to have to go punch the punch. They're going to have to probably score back and forth. If Baylor scores, Kansas State's going to have to match it right away. No 3 and outs, no getting excited about the special teams this upcoming week. If Baylor scores, Kansas State's got to score. They have to match it, because a guy like Sawyer Robertson is going to make you pay if you don't make that happen. So all eyes on the secondary this week. That is the main focus, and for good reason, because you are arguably playing one of the best quarterbacks in college football this year, a guy that passed for over 400 yards on multiple times. I think he's thrown for 3 touchdowns in every game so far this season, and he's done it against some really good competition when it comes to Auburn and SEC school, and you're defending Big 12 champions in Arizona State. One more thing before we move on to the offense here. I kind of mentioned special teams, how we don't want to focus on them. I hope we don't see him at all in the game on Saturday, but if we do, I will say Simon McClanahan has really stepped up. He has really done some great things and has continued to flip the field. And it is awesome. And if it does come down to that point where they have to use Simon, I think that's a huge benefit in favor for Kansas State because he can help you win that battle of the field position game. He has really proven to be a top player on the special teams. Kelly Ford ratings came out this past week, and special teams was seen as a top 10 special teams unit across of all college football was Kansas State. Who would have thought, right? After the special teams blunders this last year and earlier this season, well, guys like McClanahan and Luis Rodriguez, a late summer transfer addition, Coach Klieman says has ice in his veins, has continued to be one of the best kickers in the Big 12. He's absolutely clutch. Have no anxiety when he's kicking the football, and what a huge transfer portal addition he was. All right, let's get to the offensive side because I do think it's important. Of course, as I mentioned, they got to go back to back. If Baylor scores, Avery Johnson and the rest of the offense have to score. But on the plus side, because of all the success we saw from this offense against UCF, the offensive growth this past week is more than Avery Johnson. We're going to discuss that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Picks Plus awards than anyone else as of August of 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how we craft every model. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. So like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every moment count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. I've used Monarch Money for quite a long time now, about 6 months now, especially since I've moved into this new place. And just small things like reminding you how much you're spending on food delivery or just like the nice financial center on the phone is so nice. It's so clear. The data visuals, the smart categories on spending finally makes me feel control of my money without even touching a spreadsheet, which I absolutely hate. They are so boring and so much work. Monarch Money does all that work for you. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com and use code LOCKEDONCollege. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Hit that subscribe button. We're talking about the Cats every single day. And today we're talking about what we saw from the UCF game and how it still needs to improve, how that play still needs to improve. We are not perfect by any standard to win the game against Baylor. And it's a huge game, a huge win. If you do, the entire narrative shifts, in my opinion. If you win this game against Baylor, even if you win by a point, the entire season feels different. It will feel different because you will have a winning record in the Big 12 column. 2-1 sounds like life. 1-2 sounds like death when it comes to the Big 12, especially since last year, the team that made it to Arlington finished 7-2 with maybe a couple tiebreakers. If you get your second loss in the first week of October in Big 12 play, are you going to run the rest of the table when you have Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, TCU still left on the table? I don't think that's the case. The chances are very slim. So I think this is a huge game in Waco this coming Saturday. The plus side is that the offensive growth this past week was just more than Avery Johnson. We discussed it this past week, how much Avery Johnson needed to run the football, how much we need to see more from him, especially coming off his worst career start as a Kansas State quarterback against Arizona. It was bad. It was dreadful. 44% completion rating, didn't make the right decisions when he should have ran, was trying to be a perfect quarterback. You could see that, and it wasn't working out. We kind of got a step back from Avery Johnson, kind of got, in a good way, what I mean by. He went more on the Rauh side against UCF, and it worked out. The coaches asked him to run the football more. He did just that. He tied for his season high in carries in the first half with 8 carries. It was outstanding what we got from Avery Johnson in the running game. He also did great with the pass, and what he did with the pass was exciting and impressive because he did it without Jared Bradley or Jace Brown in this one. I think he looked more like a decisive runner, which was good. That early 25-yard scramble was huge and sparked confidence of this team. And really, if it wasn't for the weird trick play with Lincoln Cure to get that interception in the first drive, I think you would have had crazy momentum. I still go out on a limb here and say that, you had three possessions. The first 3 possessions of the game, you only scored 3 points total. That probably should have been 17 points or 21 even. And this game could have been out of control. I think this game, Kansas State could have scored 50 if it wasn't for those early mistakes they made because of all the growth and all the momentum that we saw from Avery Johnson and others on those first 2 drives. Dylan Edwards returning, of course, is huge as well, and that is more than helping the offensive growth. And I think having both those 2 in tandem is going to help you be able to go shot for shot against Baylor if it comes down to it. I think it's going to be a shootout. You're going to get my prediction on Friday, my full score prediction. But let me just tell you, if we're going with our friends at FanDuel, which I'm pretty sure right now the over-under's at 59.5, I am pounding that over. I think it's going to be an insane game, shootout for shootout. I think it's going to be what defense gets their first turnover. Whoever wins the turnover margin is probably going to be the one that wins this, whether it's even just 1-0 in the turnover margin. Maybe even who punts first might lose this game. And it could come down even to those middle 8 minutes that we like to hear on the broadcast these days, the final 4 in the second half and the first 4 minutes in the third quarter as well. I really enjoyed what we saw from Blake Barnett as well. Coach Klieman brought it up, how they introduced it during the bye week. And the reason they brought it up and introduced that package is because during the bye week, when they were installing the playbook and installing the plays, they weren't sure how much Dylan Edwards was actually going to play. They didn't have a confirmation if he would be ready for the UCF game. And they knew they had to get some sort of jolt, some sort of energy push in that backfield because the running game just wasn't cutting it so far this season without Dylan Edwards. And it's unfortunate because there was so much hype behind Joe Jackson this year, so much hype behind Antonio Martin, some of those guys, Devon Rice, and it just hasn't stepped up. And hopefully that changes throughout the weeks, and maybe this offensive buzz comes back and these guys step up. But having Blake Barnett was super cool. And they said if they installed it, they wanted to use it. And that's why they pushed it out on that second drive of the game. And it worked out really well. I think it worked out really well. I'm not sure how much more we'll see from that. Chris Klieman said it could just be a one-time thing because now you've already seen it. Now there's tape on that, and they're not sure if that'll be used again. But he did want to reiterate that Blake Barnett isn't just a runner. He's a great passer as well. So maybe if that package does come out, maybe we'll see more than just a Wildcat situation of Blake Barnett. Maybe we'll see him throw the football. Could be some fun stuff. Maybe we got some stuff up our sleeve in the new future. I'm excited for what this offense have shown. And dare I say, I was quite impressed from what I saw from Matt Wells. Now, there was a couple dampers in there, that Lincoln Cure interception, that trick play, but we would be amazed. We would be talking amazing things about that play if it was successful. I just didn't like the timing of it. That's all. I think that could have been a really awesome play. Could have been really fun for Lincoln Cure to get his first pass completion before his reception that he got later on in the game. But I just didn't like the timing. You had a 25-yard rush from Avery Johnson, then immediately had, I think it was a 16 or 18-yard rush from Dylan Edwards, and then you had that play where you threw the interception, and then the momentum kind of just stalled out. It was tough to see on your first drive of the game when you're trying to get the energy back, but thankfully they found a way to do that. The offensive line has been great last week as well, and that needs to continue because Baylor's defense is very good, especially on the front four. They do a really good job there. Having guys like Gus Hawkins and Devin Vass, who really stepped up on this past week, is going to be huge. So we'll see who starts on the offensive line. I think we might see some changes this coming week. Maybe Vass, maybe Hawkins step up. Maybe it's guys that take over for Line Gang. Maybe we see certain other players like JB Nelson sit out or at least get less snaps. I'll be really interested to see how that offensive line progresses and grows over the season, but most especially on Saturday against Baylor. The biggest question, I think, heading into this one for the offense is what receivers will Kansas State have? Jace Brown and Jared Bradley are both banged up with injuries right now, but Chris Klieman didn't seem too pessimistic when it came to those injuries. He made sure he said these aren't long-term injuries, and there is a chance that both of the players will be ready to go against Baylor on Saturday. He said it was too early to tell when speaking on Monday. I'm sure we'll probably get a better answer from Matt Wells when the coordinators speak on Thursday afternoon. And of course, we'll get to pay attention to the availability reports that come out because this is a Big 12 play. It would be great to have at least one of them. I enjoyed what we saw from Jaron Tibbs, who came back and did whatever he needed to do and stepped up in place of the amount of injuries that were on the wide receiver side. But because of the amount of injuries on the wide receiver side, they had to focus more on heavy set offensive sets, if you will, with the amount of tight ends. That's great and all if you're close to the red zone. But if you have to continue that shootout, that score for score back and forth, and you're not in the best field position, you might get stalled out once or twice if you are always in a heavy tight end set against a Baylor defense. And you just can't have that happen on Saturday with a crazy offense on their side led by Sawyer Robertson. And that's what I want to get to next. I want to discuss a look ahead on Baylor, talk about really an initial scouting report from what Chris Klieman said on Monday and how I feel about that, and really just how they can win this game and how important it will feel if they do. We'll do that next to close up this show right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, folks, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet and put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Hop in and visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is also brought to you by Square. The episode brought to you by Square. Your favorite neighborhood spot runs on Square. There's certain businesses that make the neighborhood the neighborhood. These are the places that become your extensions at home, whether it's the sports bar dedicated to your team's fan base, the spot for the best wings in town on game day, or that beloved local chain that's been rooted in your community for years. These businesses are what bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. There's just really interesting stuff that you can do with Square. Sports are something that brings neighborhoods together, where it's gathering for game day rituals, celebrating with the best wings in town, as I mentioned, or, finding that best deli that has some of the best hoagies when it comes to that. Hoagies is sandwiches, if you didn't know. So Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you go, support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. Kansas State will take on the Baylor Bears in Waco on Saturday, 11 o'clock Central, another early game on ESPN+. I like the early games, not going to lie to you. I enjoy it. I mentioned that on the Instant Reaction show last Saturday. I kind of like where you, especially when you get a win, of course, where you have this great feeling all day long and you get to kick back and watch the rest of college football. If you got some chores to do, you can do that too. And it doesn't feel like a drag because you've already got to watch your team play football. When you look at this Baylor Bears, the scouting report, Chris Klieman said, high-tempo offense with a balanced attack. Of course, you got your quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers in depth. Lots of good depth. I think Sawyer Robertson is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. His stats back it up. And if you watch him play, and if you've heard me this past offseason, I've kind of gone on the limb as well when we've ranked quarterbacks in the Big 12 because that was a huge narrative among all the hosts here at Locked On. I'm always made sure that Sawyer Robertson was in the conversation. I thought he was such an underrated quarterback, and he still really is. People aren't talking about him enough, even though he's leading the country in passing. The wide receivers are really good. Cameron was one of the best receivers in the Big 12 last year, continuing to do that. Trigg is one of He's one of the best tight ends in the Big 12. He's really stepped up from the get-go, had a breakout game against Auburn the first week of the season. There's just a lot of really good play from this Baylor offense, and it's nerve-wracking. And what makes me nervous the most is not only are they going to succeed, because they are going to succeed, but they hardly turn the ball over. Just like Kansas State's done a good job of not turning the ball over, Baylor's the same way as well. So it's going to be a shootout, but what needs to happen is they can't continue to let Baylor, waste any clock or keep the defense on the field. We've noticed that in the past against the game against Iowa State in the fourth quarter, Army that entire second half, and Arizona. Kansas State's defense gets gassed. And I don't think that's changed over the bye week. I don't think they miraculously had this amazing conditioning session where now they're just can run a marathon out there. I think you still have to make sure, and that can be a huge concern, that you can't get this defense to be sitting on the field for way too long. And with a Baylor offense that can control and dictate the game, that is a huge concern. Kansas State can't allow 80 or 90 snaps on defense and make it happen. It just can't happen. I do think it's going to turn into like a 40-point, 50-point shootout between each team. I really do. And that, if that does happen, it might benefit the Baylor Bears because of how good the offense is and because how the defense has a bend don't break mentality when it comes to Kansas State, and really Baylor does as well. Dave Aranda is a great coach. And I think he's kind of in the same boat when it comes to Chris Klieman as really good defensive masterminds. There are some polarizing fans that don't want Dave Aranda there anymore, just like there are some polarizing fans on Kansas State's side that think it's time for Chris Klieman to hang it up as well. They're ready for a new face. It's wild to think that because you're talking about two very good coaches who have recently won Big 12 championships. But some fans are ready for a new face. And, I've even overreacted, I guess, to the way the season started for Kansas State. And it's really humbling to look back and be like, okay, maybe we shouldn't do that. Kansas State fans, we got it pretty good. Getting 9 wins almost every season under Chris Klieman, with the exception of that COVID year. Who really counts that one? If Kansas State, Chris Klieman, the coaching staff is going to beat the Baylor Bears, Matt Wells needs to be on his A game. If we think that Matt Wells had a good game against UCF, he needs to have, if we consider that an A game, he needs to have an A+ game against Baylor. Joe Klannerman, he has to find a way to make those explosive plays not happen. Those are the number one keys right there. If the secondary on the defense can step up and find a way to get 1 or 2 turnovers like they did against UCF, if Gunnar Maldonado can get an interception just like he did against UCF, if Quay Moss can have another circus-like catch like he did against UCF, or if VJ Payne can actually hold on to the interception, the one that he dropped this past weekend against UCF, that alone will put Kansas State in the driver's seat. Then flip to the offensive side, and you continue that same type of energy, that same type of hype and momentum that you got against the Knights this past Saturday. Dylan Edwards continuing in his stride, showing that when he's healthy, he's dangerous. And there's not many that can stop him when it comes to off tackle, even when he's running up the middle. Did you notice Dylan Edwards putting his head down a couple times? He doesn't act like he is as small as he is. Dylan Edwards is becoming a very explosive and powerful running back in college football. We've seen it in the Rape Bowl game against Rutgers now, and we've seen it last Saturday against UCF. As the starting running back on this team, when he's healthy, we haven't seen a blunder from Dylan Edwards yet. That needs to continue with no mistakes on Saturday against the Baylor Bears. And then, of course, if those receivers are healthy, Jace Brown, Jared Bradley, or at least just one of them to pair with Tibbs and the rest of the tight end crew, I think you are in a really good spot. But I think it's going to be a shootout as well. You'll get my score prediction on Friday. For tomorrow's episode, we're going to cross over. We're going to talk with Cam Stewart of Locked On Baylor. We're going to have a fun conversation there, back and forth, because we both believe that Avery Johnson is the perfect quarterback to beat the Baylor Bears the way that their defense is set up. But on the flip side, Sawyer Robertson and the way that he throws the football against a still unproven secondary of Kansas State, although they had a good game on Saturday, is a perfect quarterback to beat the Wildcats. We'll hash that out on Thursday's crossover of Locked On Kansas State. But until then, please like the video, please subscribe. And it's another big moment for Locked On college football fans, Locked On and Fire TV, present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview with Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12. He leads the conversation along with two-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Hawley, and Locked On local experts. A college football preview only Locked On can do, so catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. All right, folks, please like the video, please subscribe, and we'll see you back here next time, right here on Locked On Kansas State.